I think you got it.
And this is where heartbreak hits. Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. We're going to be doing some bullnose steps, and we had a real problem with the bullnose. We're going to be doing the entire driveway in this video. It's all stamped, integral color. And the colors we're using for the integral is Sequoia Sand from Davis, and then for the antique release, we're going to use a terracotta. Here's the steps coming off the front porch. All this block that you see here for this raised planter is going to be covered with stone, ledger stone at one in the front of the house as well. All the way underneath the windowsill will be covered with stone, as well as the block with a nice cap, stone cap. And we're going to have 2 steps getting into the entrance here. And this tire wall will get solid grouted as well. Here's your step layout.
You can kind of see it's rough because I messed up on my first lines, but here's the first one to here, up, here, up, and so on.
And that line, it actually doesn't go up on that third one. That's irrelevant, that particular line, but it just comes straight across off of that second step.
We got these styrofoam bullnose forms, and man, these are expensive for being styrofoam. You wouldn't believe what these are worth. Comment down in the comment section below how much you think each one of these are, and they're only 8 feet long. So take a guess in the comment. I won't be answering your guys' guesses. All right, so I'm getting the stair bullnose foam attached right now to our wood, and I was trying to use this 3mm adhesive to stick the foam on because the screws in the back weren't working too well. But look at that, it just eats the foam. Yum, 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 yum. I mean, some of the area kind of stuck, but it definitely ate it. Luckily, it didn't hurt the bullnose face. That's good.
Yeah, you lucked out there.
The way I like to do it when I put that foam on there, you spray it on there and let it dry a little bit first. Because if you spray it directly on the foam, it eats it up. So you spray it on the wood and let it dry a little bit, and then it's kind of like a contact cement at that point. Or if you put too much glue, it just eats it away. Well, they got a bunch of different adhesives out here to try out, but I think they just stuck with the 3M. The 3M holds it there temporarily until you get your form up. Or you can put it on after you get your form up, either way. But I like to put a few nails through it also, because a lot of time the pressure of the concrete could push that foam up, or it'll try to float on you. So you put some screws or nails through it, kind of holds it from trying to either push down if concrete lands on top of it, or from the pressure it might even try to slide it up. So screws or nails are good on top of the glue. This driveway will also get a saw cut pattern at about 5 foot spacing both directions on a 45-degree angle to the house. And it'll end at the smooth bands. So you can see the 2x6 is a little short. It's 5.5 inch. The foam is 6, but if you look at this particular type of foam, the face of it has that 1/2 inch on the top before the actual radius of the bullnose starts. So what you do is that's set above. The 2x6 is set to concrete level. The foam should be set a 1/2 inch higher, and the bottom should be flush to your 2x6. And then you finish down on the top edge of your foam. That way you don't have a straight 1/2 inch edge before you hit that radius. unless you want to get really decorative and then have a half inch edge and then drop into a 3-inch bullnose right after that. But typically you don't do that. So now they're putting the road base in here. And they're just going to hand stomp it in there. A little water and pound it down. Another thing that works good to fill in big voids, this one's really not a big enough void, but you can take bales of straw, and just throw them in there and pour right over it. All the way around. You got to totally encase it. Like, you got to have at least 6 inches of concrete around the edges of it. You know, and that works good too. Here's a plate compactor. They compacted the native, and then after that they'll throw some base in there and they'll do another compaction. Now here's the rebar reinforcement that we're putting in. 3/8 inch steel on 2-foot centers.
Alright, we're getting ready and set for the concrete pour for Friday, which is not tomorrow but the next day. But right now I'm just getting the screed pins set up, so when we start laying down the concrete, we don't have a massive ocean of concrete. You get perfect elevation and levels, exactly where you want everything to slope and flow. So if you got bad bad concrete finishers that can't rod, you don't have to worry about it, because they have a system, a guided system that will make sure that they get a perfect elevation levels. So that's what these are for. As you can see right there, that's what they look like. You just set your 2x4s in between them, and they already have the elevation set. So concrete will be going up to the bottom of those 2x4s right there.
What are you doing?
I'm waxing on and waxing off.
Why?
Because this is going to be the stamp. I make sure these are clean.
So it doesn't mix color, right?
Yes, sir. I need a little bit of solution though. Here I am doing it dry first.
Here's the Sequoia sand from Davis mixed into the concrete. And this is about a 5.5 inch slump. And 5.5 inch slump means how wet the concrete is, how much water's in there. 12 inches being the worst case scenario. 1 is the stiffest. So this is, you know, kind of in the middle range. And the way you calculate your color based on how many sacks of cement per cubic yard. Like, for instance, if this has 6 sacks, 90-pound sacks of cement per cubic yard of material, then based off of that, when you're calculating your colors, it'll tell you on the color chart, it'll say either, you know, 1/2 pound to 3 pounds of color per sack of cement. And that's how you would know how much color to add if you wanted to do this on site, like add your color, for instance. Or if you're even hand mixing, you could do it by those color charts, knowing the quantities and how much cement you're putting in there. So in other words, it's the cement that's getting colored, not the rock or the sand. Another thing that'll affect your color pretty drastically is the quantities of water you put in there. The more water you put in there, it's gonna get washed out. Basically, your color will be a lot less than whatever it shows on the color chart. So the main thing to do is always be really consistent on your water ratios, and then you'll get a uniform color. Also, finishing practices make a big difference in the outcome of the final curing color. And if you finish one job or one area differently than you did the other, the color's going to be a little bit different. So if you do everything the same every time, and be consistent, in other words, on every step through the entire process.
We're going just right up to the house, right? Right under?
Basically gonna be like this. Something like that. On red or black, bro.
Yeah,
Evens or odds.
I know, that's what I was telling Tim. I was like, I should have just done roulette. It's like, damn it.
Yeah. Dude, I won 200 from roulette last time.
Oh, no way.
2 hands down for 100 each. Hit both.
Oh, sick.
Here's your walking edger, 1/2 inch radius. And this is a new one that hasn't been used much. Here's the band going in. So it's a 12 inch. And they do make walking edgers with the built-in joiner at 12. You can get them at 12 inch, 10 inch, whatever you want. It'll edge and joint simultaneously. The good thing about joining it separately when you're edging, like if you have an edge that's not straight and you're joining up against an existing concrete edge that's not very straight, that would make your joint not straight as well. So at least you could have one thing straight out of the two by doing them separately. Oh, here's the Fresno, and they just did a screw on. They did a screw, so edger, and then they have an adjustable joiner that can just put it any width. That's a nice tool to have. As the concrete gets harder, you won't be able to use that tool on your final pass. You have to really break down to the hand tool. But it's a nice way to get it started by running those walkers. But eventually you're going to have to get down on it. And you can see the cleanup process going where the concrete meets the city sidewalk. Nothing that a sponge and a bucket of water won't cure. You could put plastic over that sidewalk too. But I've seen a lot of mistakes made with plastic covering existing concrete pours. Like I was just walking around on a job site. It wasn't my job site or anyone that I know. I just happened to be in a location looking at some new concrete. And I was thinking, wow, they did keep this pretty clean. But then as I looked closer, the elevations were different because they had the plastic over it. They couldn't tell the height of the existing. So they created a trip hazard, but it was really kept really clean though. Well, here's the powder release going on, and that's a terracotta. It's also antiquing release agent, would be the technical terminology for it. So it releases the mats so they don't stick, and then on top of that, you're getting a secondary color in there. You could throw multiple release agents, on here, different colors, blotch them around, and get really elaborate. You could pop a little gray release out there, a little terracotta, maybe a little, whatever colors you like, just throw them all out there.
Yeah, keep going, Jefe.
Now, if you do unintentionally get release on the bands, or you can see how that mat's overlapped on that band. Well, even though he may think that there's no release on the band, there's still release on the bottom of the mat, so it's already got color in that band right now, unless you retrowel it out. So, but I mean, you can get all that color off of the band if you, when you do your rinse, you just hit those bands a little harder with some muriatic acid diluted, and that should pull the color out of those bands so you get a good fine determining line of the color transitions at the joint. But of course, then in really emergency situations, and if that doesn't work, then you go to sandblasting. You just sandblast the entire band, and then you get, a sand wash band that's with no release agent, which is a nice look too. Now, when you're throwing color like this, the way I like to do it is I like to use a brush. That way you get it out there really fine. You get a really uniform pattern with using a brush. It spreads it evenly, because when you throw it with your hand, it comes out in chunks sometimes. And then when you stamp your mat down, if you get too much release under there, it's gonna create an area underneath there that you can't displace all that pattern because it's too much. So your mat's not going to go down. So you just want the bare minimum of release. That way you get a really uniform stamp. Now they're trying to strip these foam off these steps, and this is where heartbreak hits. Looks like it's going
got
pretty
it.
good at this moment. And then, boom,
Oh.
the whole nose falls off. That happens, you know, more often than you'd like it to on these cantilevers. There is some ways around it, but it's a lot of forethought that has to go into it to avoid these situations, but it can be repaired, and that's what they're going to do here. So they saved the styrofoam they pulled off. They put some screws in there. The screws will kind of act as dowels. Now that's going to ensure that that concrete they put back up there, because at this point the whole driveway's stamped out. It's finished. It's hard as a rock. The only reason it's a little wetter up here is because this is what the shade from the house was all day long. So they're working off of the mats. They've got the mats, so we'll just stay on those and then work that nose.
All right, here we are the day after the pour. We're gonna be mapping out the area for a diamond grid pattern. They're gonna be 5-foot squares turned on an angle to make them diamond grid. It was a pretty tough pour though yesterday. One of our finishers showed up late, so it was really just me, my brother, and 2 other guys that were getting down on this. And then of course we had Jimmy shooting the whole thing, but this step right here actually broke off on us yesterday. We were able to save it, but it was tough. It was definitely a tough one for us. Definitely a stressful day.
Second day, cleanup time. First priority was to sweep up all the excess release. Matter of fact, you can reuse that release as long as you haven't got a lot of debris, you know, like leaves and dirt blowing into it overnight. You just sweep that release up and use it over again. So if you're doing multi-pours on this job site, you might as well save this stuff, in other words, and just use it. Just keep using it until until you have to buy more.
Okay, so we got all the antique release cleaned off of the driveway as best as we could for what it is right now. Of course we're gonna pressure wash, but we do need to get the diamond grid snapped in right now with our blue chalk, and then cut those in and then pressure wash everything. Okay, so we just snapped out this line, and this line is parallel with the house. So we measured off the house to this line. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be putting a perpendicular line straight down the middle of the driveway, centered with the end of the driveway. So we have the center marked out right here, but we need to make sure we're square at the house. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this right here, and it's gonna be somewhere around here, and we know this line's now parallel and straight with the house. Now we just got to make sure our perpendicular line is squared. Now let me line my stuff up, and you will be next. Okay, put yours down. Okay. Yep, that's it. All right, Jimmy, give me a snapperooski. Perfect. That's dark.
So this would act as your center line, establishing your saw cut grid. So if you wanted to center all of your squares diagonally at the entrance or the middle of the driveway, you could establish this center line first and then work the corners of your squares off of that. So you can see they snapped the line up the middle of the driveway, and that's just to get center line. And once you have a center line, you can work the corners of your squares at a 45-degree angle off of that center line And then you'll have all your squares, the points of your squares, straight with the entrance of the driveway. It's the same. You do that for tile. If you were setting tile on a 45-degree angle, you'd establish some center lines and then work all your 45s off of that.
Okay, so it's been about 30 minutes since me and Jimmy got our layout set up for this diamond grid driveway so that we can start cutting everything in. What we did first was we got our perpendicular lines set up, and how we did that is we wanted to have our first diamond centered with the length of the driveway right here. So we just measured the distance from the bands and got our center point. Once we got our center point, what we did was we had to get a parallel line with the house. So we measured off the house, we got this line right here, and this basically was our very first starting point. These two lines, this one running this way, and this perpendicular line running all the way up. You can see all of the diamonds hit right there, all the way up.
So that's a good way to do your layout right there. That way all your the squares are lined up where you want them to be. Now if the perimeter is square also with that, then you should have all your halves that meet that band should all be the same all the way up. And as well as along the front of that planter bed and the street if everything was square. So they're not going to be using any muriatic acid diluted to help rinse some of this release agent off. They're just going to use a pressure washer, and that works fine in most cases. In some cases, if you're using a darker color or you just want more color off of it and leave less of the antique release agent on there, then you could go to like a 5 or 10 to 1 diluted ratio of muriatic acid and water, and then you'd knock a lot more color off. So that turned out really nice. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one, because this is part 4 of about an 8-part series. Here's the moment of truth. We're going to get a semi close-up on that bullnose at some point here to see how well the repair went. Surprisingly, you know that the concrete was so fresh when they reattached that, it adheres really well, even without the screws. In most cases, I've found that they don't typically ever come off again. Another thing you could do is throw some glue. If you had some concrete glue, you could throw that on there too. But that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.